The sweet sound.
Oh, yeah, there you go. I'm doing good.
Hello, welcome everybody. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm Jenny. I'm an advisor here at Health Professions, and I would like to introduce Matt, who's an international student advisor at Services for International Students and Scholars. Would everybody like to say hello in the chat? Hello, 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 hello. So nice to that you have all taken some time out of your day to be here with us. Um, we're going to talk through preparing for health professions as an international applicant. We're just going to give it a minute here for everybody to come on in. I think we'll get started at about 5 after, just allowing people to get here. If you feel like sharing a special perspective that you'd like us to keep in mind as we're presenting, if you know what profession you're headed for, or if you have a specific question, you could put that in the chat for us so we can tailor this presentation to you a little bit. Hmm, I see an MD, PhD in the room, headed for osteopathic medicine. Awesome. I don't see anybody else filtering in, so maybe we'll just get started. All right, I'm going to do an official start um, so that we have a nice start to our recording. So hello and welcome everybody to Preparing for Health Professions as an international student. And I'm Jenny. I'm an advisor here at Health Professions, and this is Matt from Services for International Students and Scholars. Matt, you want to say hi?
Yep. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming today. It is rainy, so maybe you got nothing else to do. But if you're interested in health professions, this is a very, very good start for you to get this information. And a little bit later on, I'll be talking about how you might be able to use some of your work authorization benefits as an international student to help you get there.
Yeah.
And welcome.
Yeah. And I just want to introduce myself a little bit. I'm an advisor here at Health Professions, but my career goes way back with an interest in the intersection of health professions and international education. I started my career as a Peace Corps volunteer in Togo, West Africa, and I was working on the eradication of guinea worm disease. Then I've worked at uh, global affairs at the Global Learning Hub for about a dozen years. So I bring this interest in the intersection of experiential education and international education to my work here at Health Professions. I want to take a moment to start with a land acknowledgement. I'll just give you a moment to read. Thank you. So the way that this presentation today is formatted is sort of as a series of questions. So we'll be working our way through questions like, do U.S. medical schools ever accept international students? What about dental, pharmacy, occupational therapy, genetic counseling, vet med, and optometry schools? Is the application process different for international students? What are my options for financial aid? What questions should I ask when making my school list? what questions or how can HPA and Services for International Students and Scholars, SISS, help? And do medical schools value global education? And what can I do after graduation? So, like I said, we're super interested in your questions. So feel free to bring those into the conversation as well in the chat. So here's us from HPA. We wanted to say a hearty welcome. You're absolutely in the right place. We're here to serve all UC Davis students. If you're an undergraduate, graduate, and we even serve alumni, our job doesn't end until you get into your health professional school. So we can be with you the whole way through, from choosing prerequisites all the way through to supporting your personal statement and your interview prep. So we're very happy to be here for you. Here's where we're physically located, not too far from the ARC. And if you're looking to meet with any of us, we're all bringing really interesting sets of skills. We have a test prep specialist, writing specialist, people whose experience with professional schools goes well deep. So I'm excited to welcome you to work with us. We also have professional student staff. So these are advisors are students in med school, nursing school, vet school, and they're all bringing really great perspectives. So if you're looking to connect with somebody who's like just one step ahead of where you are now, who can tell you a little bit about their experience and how they got where they are, these are great people to connect with. And we also have on our team Sarah, who was a former peer advisor and now UC Davis alumni. And we have peer advisors. So if you wanted to check in about class selection, strategies for success in classes, a peer's point of view on developing yourself as a competitive applicant, these are peer advisors are great for you to talk with. And just so charming. So health professions advising, our main thing is, you guessed it, advising. There's a lot of ways to connect with us. You could just call if you're in the middle of your pastime coming up and you need to make some last minute decisions. If you're jammed up on an application form, just call. We also have drop-in advising on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. So if you wake up in the morning, you're like, I got to talk to somebody today. Make yourself a 15-minute appointment and come on in and talk with us. And then we also have regular scheduled advising appointments. Those are 30 minutes long. We can go for a deep dive on whatever issues you're bringing, whatever sort of support you need. We're there for you. And the peer advisors do express advising and have their own Zoom drop-in hours. So if you're looking to talk with them, look under contact us or about us and find the page with the peer advisors to schedule with them. So health professions advising, we also do a good amount of programming. So like workshops, programs, and events. Anybody want to raise their hand if they were at the recent pre-health conference? Largest in the nation. I'm just bragging. Great opportunity to meet admissions officers from lots of different professional schools. And then those same admissions officers are offering workshops in the afternoon. We also have things like test prep, interview week, spring break, road trip, preparing to apply series, and of course, this programming today. So the programming and the advising kind of work hand in hand. Use the programming to generate a list of questions, but we always want to tailor the answer to you. So I don't want you to get your answer just from a standing web page, even though our web pages are great and super informative. I always want to know what your questions are so that we can make a plan that works for you. Just a little bit of our programming so you can see us out on campus. All right, so how did we get here? You are probably considering a health profession. Would you like to share in the chat what has you considering a health profession? I'll just make a few guesses. Um, I'm going to guess that maybe you really like working with people. Maybe you are especially compassionate or empathetic. Maybe you're especially good at solving problems. Maybe you take an interest in and know that you have a deep down ability to sit with people who are in pain or need your assistance. Maybe you're great at science. Maybe you have a component of your personal background or your family history that motivates you to solve certain problems. Yeah, through a lens of health equity and social justice. Um, However, you are coming into these professions, it's your story that is your strength. It's that winds up being your unique contribution to the field. Um, and we want to help you grow in your identity and help know where that leads in terms of the impact you can make in your career. Thanks, Alan, for sharing. Um, so let's move on to exploring and choosing the right field for you. So there's three different ways to become a doctor. You might be an allopathic doctor with an MD, an osteopathic doctor with a DO, or a podiatrist with a DPM. These are all doctors. And here are some details to give you a sense of the process. So for example, our MD schools are seeing about 52,000 applicants a year, and 22,000 people actually starting medical school. In California, we have 13 medical schools, and there are 158 in the US. Osteopathic medical schools up see 23,000 applicants, give or take, and about 8,000 students matriculating, 3 schools in California and 41 throughout the US. Podiatric schools of medicine see about 900 applicants and almost 600 people matriculate, with 2 schools in California and 11 throughout the United States. Does anyone want to share in the chat what their takeaway is from these numbers? Why do you think I'm sharing this set of data? One thing that you might be noticing is that the number of applicants versus the number of matriculants gives you a sense of how competitive these programs are. And it also gives you a sense of like how many seats are available total in programs that will train you to be a doctor. So the big question, do US medical schools accept international students? Yes, but it's very challenging. And so I just want to be direct about that up front, so that you can plan accordingly. It's our belief that everybody deserves good advising. Everybody deserves an advisor who's up on their facts. And everybody deserves to bring questions and have their questions answered. Um, so when we talk about admission to US medical schools being challenging, we know that 49 out of 171 of the allopathic medical schools accept international students. And that's according to MSAR, and I'll share a link for that. down the line in this program. In 2022, there were just over 1,000 international applicants to MD granting programs in the US. And of those applicants, 314 winded up actually starting MD granting programs. In the 2022-23 school year, there were 1,375 international students actually in MD granting programs. So that's over a 4-year program. So they're about, what does that make if I divide by 4? 300 per class. And that squares with the number that matriculated in 2022. In of the 66 osteopathic medical schools, 23 accept international students and 7 accept international students on a case-by-case basis. And then 8 out of 10 of the podiatric schools of medicine accept international students. So how competitive is the process? As we saw in the last couple of slides, there are a limited number of seats for international students in US medical schools, about 2 or 3 seats per school per year, with a class size ranging from 40 to 250 students. So that's to give you a sense of how competitive it is for these seats. In general, private schools will accept more international students than public schools will. And in general, health professional schools other than allopathic medicine are more international friendly. So if it's competitive, how do we be competitive? The first thing you want to look at is your GPA. You want to be looking to have a high, strong GPA, around a 3.8, alongside high test scores. So a number one priority for international students applying to medical schools in the US would be to prioritize their metrics, things that can be measured about you. Another high priority would be to have a good amount of research experience. So finding your way early on into a lab and building up those skills and those letters of recommendation, people that can vouch for you and who take an interest in your success in medical school. We have a test prep specialist here, Alan, and I'd encourage you to meet with our test prep specialist to talk about test scores. But in general, I think you're looking 510 and up. Then your application to health professional schools will take into account all of your multiple intersecting identities. So your identity matters to who you choose to serve, where you go when you dig deep, how you connect with people. And that's one of the real strengths that you're bringing to your education. So we'll talk a lot about the attributes that you bring in your application process. It just happens that of the 3 pieces of the holistic pie, metrics and research experience would be the 2 to prioritize. Okay, so how does this all work and where is the constraint? Let's talk about basic science, clinical rotations, and residency. So traditionally, the first 2 years of medical school are book learning. You're going to take your anatomy, you're going to take a lot of science very quickly. And then in the second 2 years, you'll start your clinical rotations. And in those rotations, you'll get a chance to see how the different areas of the hospital work, and you'll start learning by doing. So the first couple of years, not depending on the school, there's comparatively less hands-on. And then the second 2 years, a little more hands-on. They'll start by letting you hold things and standing in the back of the room and gradually work you up to being able to really participate in what's going on in clinic. Um, it's important to ask your schools what their plan is for you as an international student. How do they plan clinical rotations to go for their international students? And then after medical school, the next step is residency. And the process is called a match. So once you are in your 4th year of medical school, you'll apply again to residency programs. And when you're accepted into a residency program, you match into the residency program. Keep track of that buzzword because that's going to be another important one to ask your prospective schools. How, what do they see as the match rate for their international students going into residency programs? When you're a resident at a hospital, you're a paid trainee. And because you're a paid trainee, this requires verification of federal employment eligibility. So you switch from student status to employee status. So that requires special attention to your employment eligibility and your visa status. So it's really important that you talk with your international office at your institution to learn more about visa sponsorship. Would you like to chime in anything about that at this point, Matt?
Not too much, but
Yeah. We've got
do
some more
certain things. Oh,
detailed
yeah.
slides at the end, so I know I'm sort of springing this on you.
No, no, that's okay. The important thing is that if they are a medical school that accepts international students, they will have some sort of process for you to go to get work authorization or to be engaged in this. And when you start to look at those institutions and start to select which ones you want to go to, that is something you're going to need to look out for.
Thanks, Matt. Another way to start researching the possibility of med school for yourself is to look at international med schools. For example, you might consider going to school in Australia or the Caribbean or Mexico. Um, I'll set you up with a good list of questions to ask your prospective schools. But one thing to ask would be, what is the path to citizenship? So, for example, Australia really values intellectual migrants, and they will, as soon as you start school there, they'll put you on a path to citizenship. Chris, thank you for your question in the chat. Who should we ask these questions before or after we matriculate? Yeah, uh, any the application process is so demanding and so detailed. Everyone wants to be assured of success well before you matriculate. So ask these questions at info sessions with your prospective medical schools. Ask these questions um, by direct email to admissions officers in the admissions office of your prospective medical school so that you get a clear picture of what the school has done in the past for their international students and scholars. Um, Thanks again for that question. All right. Um, can I take the MCAT abroad? Yes. Here's a list of places where the MCAT is offered abroad. So you can see from this that the American Association of Medical Colleges is invested in an international component of medical education. They're offering these MCATs abroad in order to facilitate application for international students. So up to now, we've been talking about MD, DO, and podiatric medical schools. Now I want to switch and talk about schools that prepare you for some of the other health professions. Dental schools, for example, all 7 dental schools in California do admit international students. Pharmacy schools, similar. 7 of the 14 pharmacy schools in California admit international students. And in PharmCast, their website indicates whether a pharmacy school considers non-US students for admission. And I have a link for you to be able to research PharmCast that I'll share with you at the end of this program. If you're headed for occupational therapy, genetic counseling, or veterinary medicine, all of these programs accept international students. If you're headed for optometry school, all of these programs also accept international students. So remembering that my guess is that you're a person who's got really superior ability to connect with your prospective clients and patients, and that you also have the chops for a practical applied science education. These professions are all ones that will give you the opportunity to use your skills in this way. So let's start digging into how the application process is different for international students. One thing to know is that professional schools, whether that's a med school, a dental school, an optometry school, or whichever, the professional schools may not accept prerequisites taken abroad. So that's something to ask about early on in before you start your application process. Schools may require the TOEFL. They will likely require visa application. So they probably will need you to apply to the school early on as soon as that application opens to allow time for visa application. Oh yeah, I just said that part. Um, then applications fees may be different if you're an international applicant. And there may be a requirement of a translation of a foreign transcript. So check with your school which service they have approved for translation. I like to make the point all the time that it's always best to ask the person with the power to give you permission. So one of the interesting things about my role here at HPA is I know a fair amount about the application process for international students, but I don't set the rules. HPA doesn't set the rules. Your actual prospective professional schools set the rules. So that's why you're always going to want to be asking their admissions offices what they require. So specifically in terms of whether they accept prerequisites taken abroad, whether they require the TOEFL, what they require in terms of visa application, and what their fees are and what transcription services they approve. Any questions about any of that? Thanks. Okay, let's dive into what do you do now while you're here at Davis to prepare for applying for professional schools. Most U.S. Health professional schools want you to take your prerequisite courses at an accredited U.S. university or college like Davis. And most schools will want you to take the TOEFL. So again, just be sure to check with your individual professional school's admission office about what their requirements are. All right. Now let's start talking about what your actual application process looks like. Each of the fields has a different centralized application service called CAS for short. So AMCAS is for allopathic medicine, ACOMAS is for osteopathic, AACPM is for podiatric applicants, ADSAS is for dentistry, PharmCAS is for pharmacy, and OptumCAS is for optometry. And I'll have links for those for you at the end of this presentation. Here's a big consideration. Is financial aid available for international students? My best advice is to check with your individual school's financial aid office. Um, Ask them if they have a plan or what has been available for previous international students. Most likely, the aid will be in the form of private loans and scholarships. Schools may request proof that you can pay for the first year or two of school before admitting you. So that is definitely an area that you need to know about and plan for, so that you can start to prepare to show that documentation. Um, One thing that's for sure is that federal financial aid is not available to international students. So, for example, if you're seeing direct Stafford or direct Plus or Perkins loans um, in a professional school's financial aid resources, those will not be resources that are available to international applicants. All right, here's the big one. If you're going to screenshot any part of this presentation, this is, I think, your most valuable. So questions to ask when making your school list. So a school list is part of your application process, and we'll talk it through more. Remember, I was saying HPA has all these workshops and things. So one of our series of workshops is an app prep workshop, and we'll talk you through how to create a school list. Basically, you're just making like an Excel or Google Sheet type document where you list your schools down one side and then questions that matter to you going across. So some of your questions will be things like, is funding available? You can research that on a per school basis. Do you have scholarships if I'm admitted? What's your match percentage? What percentage of international graduates go on to residency? Match percentage is one of the ways that the success of a school is measured in general. And so they will not admit you if they haven't seen good match percentages. This is an area where your success is their success. So schools should be right on top of those statistics and really willing to talk about them. Um, a really good question to ask a prospective school is, what's been your history of supporting international students? Um, what's been your, if you're applying international, you can also ask sort of the same question by asking, what's been your percentage of non-US students? You can ask your schools if they have a clinical network for the second 2 years, and where do students do their clinical rotations. You can ask how clinical rotations are supported and if there's visa support for clinical rotations. Clinical rotations, depending on where you um, do your degree, could be could be in the US or could be international. All right, so bringing it back home, how can HPA and SISS support you? Um, like I was saying before, each health professional school sets its own policies. And so whereas HPA doesn't set admissions policies, we can help support you in asking smart questions, and we can help you in your research process. And SISS is here for you to help current and graduating students stay in visa compliance while you gain that all-important experience. One series of questions that you might be asking yourself is, upon graduating, will you stay in the US or return to your home country? Um, on some level, this is a personal question, like what is your preference? Um, Uh, so I encourage you to just like do a self check-in, think about the pros and cons. What do you see for yourself in terms of the development of your career? How does your life articulate with your professional life? And then once you know what you prefer, have a good discussion with your international student advisor and learn what's possible from a visa point of view. I'm sure that you're aware that in the US, our healthcare workforce has lagged behind in representation, and that representation is really important in the way that people connect with their healthcare providers. So we can see strong arguments for applying to work in the US after graduating to be able to connect with the diverse US population who are seeking healthcare and hoping to find someone who speaks their language, understands their background, and is able to bridge healthcare to local populations. As you might have guessed, research shows that there's greater parent patient adherence to medical recommendations when recommendations come from a physician who can relate to the patient socially, culturally, or linguistically. Um, when the UC Davis School of Admission, I'm tongue-tied. When the UC Davis School of Medicine starts off their school year, they started off with a white coat ceremony to welcome all of the new students, and they take a version of the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm. And they actually invite each student who has a different ancestral language to come up and say the first line of that oath in their ancestral language. The line of students is quite long. I would say 50 or more students stand up and say the first line of that oath in their ancestral language. And it's really moving to be in the room and hear their families and other families who impacted by having a physician who can relate linguistically, coming into their training, coming on board to serve the people of California. Um, Also, as you're starting to research a question about what you want to do after you graduate, I encourage you to research your practice rights in your home country. Learn what rights does a person who holds an MD have in their home country? What rights will you have with a degree or a license in dentistry from a US school? Will those rights be recognized in your home country? And the same for all the other professions. Any questions coming up as I run us through this series of questions? All right, I'll keep an eye on the chat. So here's another series of questions to help you start your planning. So these are questions to ask about practicing in your home country. Um, in your home country, what are the licensure requirements in the country in which I wish to practice? So for example, say you earned an optometry license in the US, or you learned how to be a genetic counselor, or an occupational therapist or any of the other health professions. Um, can a person just hang out a shingle and say, yeah, I'm an occupational therapist or a genetic counselor in any given country? You need to research whether your license that you earned in the US gives you practice rights where you plan to practice. Um, so just to give an example, the MD is recognized internationally, and the DO degree has practice rights in 65 countries. All right, now let's move on to talking about like the value of global experience in medical schools and residency. Um, we know that, as I was talking about, there's plenty of research to say that we all benefit when in medical schools and health professional schools internationalize. It helps, like I was saying before, in connecting with patient populations. And we see that many medical schools invest in global health experiences, whether that's offering students the opportunity to research a global health question, to do part of their classwork abroad, or part of their clinicals or residencies abroad. We know that some residency programs aid in the creation of global physicians who wish to serve in multiple countries. So that's another start piece to start researching when you're making your school list. What kind of programs does your prospective school offer? Does it offer residency programs or global health experiences in the course of your medical education? All right, I'm going to hand it over to Matt to tackle curricular practical training, or CPT.
Mhm. And for all of you here, I'm somewhat assuming that you are likely in an F1 visa status. If you are in a J1 visa status or a different visa status, let me know in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to go forth with some training opportunities, training authorization opportunities that are available for F1 visa students. And there are a few, and one of them is CPT, but I'm going to get to CPT second. The first is on-campus employment. So if you are an F1 international student, you can engage in on-campus employment up to 20 hours per week via the fall, winter, spring terms, and more during any breaks. So that gives you the ability um, that gives you the ability to engage in something on campus. And on campus is considered satellite facilities too, such as the UCD Med Center. We'll talk about that, I think, a little bit with the health-related experiences. So you have the ability as a student, and on-campus employment doesn't require authorization. You're just automatically eligible for it. So you can use that. I mean, some students use it just to help supplement funds, work in the coho or work in one of the campus offices. But students can definitely and do use it to gain experience. We have a number of students who are doing internships and labs on campus, working with faculty, working on research projects. So you can absolutely use that to gain experience. And as Jenny mentioned in the beginning, this is competitive, and the best resume you can have with more experience is helpful to you. So use that. And then the other two are going to be off-campus experiences. One is called Curricular Practical Training, or CPT, which gives an F1 international student eligibility to do off-campus employment or internships or some type of training while you're still completing your degree requirements. So if you are still a student here, you have the ability to apply for that to engage in off-campus employment or internships that are directly related to your major. Now, an OPT is every F1 international student who completes 1 year, or excuse me, every F1 international student who completes a degree program gets 1 year of work authorization eligibility to engage in employment or training that is directly related to the field of study or major after you complete your degree requirements. So that's sort of the main difference. CPT while you're a student, OPT after. And then for OPT, you get 1 year. And then if you are in a STEM field, you have the ability to extend that for 2 more years. So a total of 3 years experience. So how can you use these? Well, CPT you can use while you're a student to get off campus and get into some type of training or internship experience. It can be at a doctor's office, it can be at a research facility, it can be at a medical center. We have lots of students use that. You do have to be eligible for CPT. To be eligible for CPT, you had to have completed 1 full year of study inside the United States, and you must be in good academic standing. Okay? To apply for CPT is very easy. In fact, you need to have a job offer first or internship offer first before you can apply for CPT. So you are more than okay to go out and talk to potential employers, training sites, or internship sites. You can interview with them. You can even accept employment, but you just won't be able to start doing that until you have that CPT authorization. And that authorization can take up to 2 weeks. So CPT while you're a student to get that experience or on-campus employment as well. And then OPT, as I mentioned, is for after you complete your degree requirements. And we talked before, Jenny had talked before about what do you do after you graduate? Are you going to stay? And you can potentially use OPT to be able to stay inside the United States to get that experience. I've seen some students, particularly in health fields, call it a gap year. And some of that is they're spending time working on their application and their test scores. But you can use that experience, not necessarily for that, but you can use that OPT to gain further experience, get out there in your field. But the one key thing to note about both CPT and OPT is any employment or internships or training experiences need to be directly related to your major here at UC Davis. And that's where sometimes, not a lot, but sometimes we have issues with students because it's based upon your major here, not necessarily what you want to do in your future. So if you want to be a dentist in your future, you want to be a doctor in your future, but you came here and studied environmental science or art, it might be hard for us to be able to approve a work authorization off campus for CPT or OPT for a field that's not related to your major. So that might be a little bit of a push for you to check what your major is now and see if it's going to align to allow you to do that stuff. Where you may not have issues if you are in a major in the College of Biological Sciences, right? There are almost every major there, you'll be able to find something that's directly, or be able to find some work that's directly related to your major that you took there. And in some of the other fields, maybe too. But again, if you're a computer science student or an engineering student, unless you're going to go into sort of medical device engineering, or you're in the College of Letters and Sciences and you're studying physics, that might be a little bit tougher. So that's something to consider moving forward. And I think with that, Jenny's going to talk about one of our campus opportunities for you to gain some experience next. Oh, and sorry, one more thing really quickly. For those of you who are here on another visa, not an F or a J, if you're in another visa category such as H, we are really not able to provide you much guidance on that, especially if you are a son or daughter, if you're a sibling or son or daughter of an H-1B dependent, you are likely not eligible for off-campus work authorization. And if you have questions, if you're in H status and you have questions about what your work authorization status is, I would highly encourage you to speak with the sponsor of the predominant H-1 visa holder. They should be able to provide you guidance in that field. Sorry, go ahead, Jenny.
Thanks, Matt. I always appreciate you being here. It makes such a difference to be able to include the perspective of SISS in this presentation. So thank you so much. Yeah, so health-related experiences are offered through our Career Center. You may in the past have heard of them referred to HRIs, same thing, just new name. These are entry-level volunteer and internship roles. They put together like 1,000 of these a year at 50 different sites. So there are some in Davis, but there are also some in surrounding communities. And they require a 4-hour commitment per week for 10 weeks. for a minimum of 40 hours per quarter. So they're counting on you, and they want to see some commitment. Um, and some experiences will require a 2-quarter commitment. If you're thinking about applying, check with the Career Center's health-related experience portal. I know that they opened up in November for winter quarter, but they may still have space, or otherwise you could start looking for spring quarter opportunities. Um, these are really nice experiences to go for as a starting place, because they are not competitive. They're not competitive in the sense of like who's got what GPA or how much experience. They take all comers. They will kind of try to prioritize who's closer to graduation to make sure everybody that wants one of these experiences can have one before they graduate. So if you don't get it the first time, don't worry, just apply again the next time it comes around. Your turn will come. Um, and they're really great ways to be in the room where it happens and start to build your professional network of and start to see what goes on in clinical settings, so that you can ask your questions. How did you get your training? What training did you build on after you graduated from your health professional program? How's your work-life balance? What trends do you see in this field? So as much as these are direct clinical experience, there are also opportunities for networking.
I would also add just really quickly, I do work with a number of international students who engage in these HREs. They do get CPT for them. They thoroughly enjoy them. They go through the whole process. They get a lot of experience. So this is a real option for a lot of you here, and highly recommend these.
Thanks, Matt. Um, Another avenue to gain experience would be through our student-run clinics. These are just a jewel in the crown of UC Davis. They are run by undergraduates and students at the med school. Many other universities have just one student clinic. Even some med schools have just one clinic. We have 14. Um, all of them are working at the intersection of cultural and social skills, and clinical skills. So they're really getting out into the communities, and they take the how and the why of how they provide service really seriously. It's worth researching your clinic very deeply before you apply. I'd be happy to help with that process. Um, it's a tremendous way to start to get to know the lived experience of the people of this area, and learn how healthcare is tailored to specific populations. Anything you would add, Matt?
Same thing. We've had a couple of international students engage in these. Some of these might be considered on-campus employment depending on the relationship with UC Davis. Some of them aren't. But that doesn't mean that you don't have the ability to apply for CPT to engage in these. And again, another great experience area for you to get to build up that resume and that application.
Mm-hmm. So check with each clinic about what their application cycle is. When will they get that fired up? In general, no experience is necessary, but there will likely be an interview, and it is competitive. Most of the student-run clinics will have info sessions to help you learn about the clinic, to kind of get a sense of whether your values and interests match with what they're doing. And and so look out for those info sessions. Alan, thanks for letting us know that you're part of a clinic. That's great to hear. All right, let's talk timeline. So, if you're a student now and you're starting to plan ahead about what does my application look like? How am I going to do all of this? Two of the timelines that are really common are called either straight through or growth year. So when a student applies straight through, this is the more challenging route. It means applying in the summer between your junior and senior years. So that means that you'll have finished most of your prerequisites and you'll have taken the MCAT in the spring or summer of your third year. So that's kind of tough to do considering the coursework that you need to prepare for the MCAT. If you're thinking that you might be a straight through student, you'll probably have a strong GPA and you'll have gained most of your experiential hours already. Remember, I was talking about that research experience is very important for international applicants. So applying straight through, you would have gained quite a bit of research experience by the end of your junior year. Taking a growth year or a gap year means applying in the summer after you graduate and that you opt to do one of the following. Maybe you, in your growth year or gap year, you would do OPT, or maybe in your summer, you would do a special master's program, or maybe you would go home. So check with SISS as you make those plans to make sure that you stay in visa compliance during your growth year. Anything you would add, Matt?
Other than, yeah, again, OPT can be used for a gap year as long as you plan to engage in some sort of employment, internship, or training. And while you are doing that, you can also, work on your application process. But you can't use OPT just for the application process. It would have to be used for some sort of training or employment experience. But during that time, you can do that, engage in that stuff as well. And we do have students who go on to do, are they called post-baccalaureate programs? Am I getting that right,
Mm-hmm.
Kenny? Yeah. And you may need to work with that institution to determine if they are going to generate you an I-20 to be able to study there. And if that's the case, then yes, you can work with SISS. We can transfer your CVIS record there to that program so that they can generate you an I-20 to study there. And if you were considering any of those options, I'll show you a little bit towards the end where you can get our contact information and find further information about on-campus employment, CPT, and OPT.
Thanks, Matt. All right, so coming into the end, um, just to summarize, um, check with your individual professional school's admissions office about what their requirements are. Application is, I'm not going to lie, more complex and challenging, but HPA and SISS are here to help. Not all medical schools accept international students. Students are schools usually accept a small number, so the competition is intense. The competition is less intense for some of the other health professions, and there's no federal financial aid. All right. As soon as I turn off this recording, I'll start popping these links into the chat for you. But you're also super welcome to follow up with me at Health Professions Advising. I'll put the link in the chat for how to connect with us at Advising, or actually, I think that's the next slide. And I'd be happy to get you these resources. Anyway, quite a bit of research required, but we're here to help you get started on that research. Any questions? Okay, for now, I'm just going to say thank you all for being here. It's been a real pleasure getting to talk with you. I hope that I get to talk with you about your individual goals and individual plans and start putting those pieces in place. Here are all the ways to stay connected with health professions advising.
And can I just share a little bit of information on our website too?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Let me do that. Oh, whoops. Yep. And hopefully you all can see my screen right now.
Oh,
Get this out of the way. Can you see my screen?
let me stop sharing.
Oh,
There we go.
okay. And on our website, you can find further information about on-campus employment, CPT and OPT under the student section, under student employment. You can see curricular practical training, on-campus employment, optional practical training, and the STEM OPT extension. If you click on these really provide you all the information that you need to do, including the timelines for application and step-by-step instructions on how you start the application process, including our online tutorial, which is really the first step is to review that information, and then again, step-by-step instructions. And if you have further questions about any of that, you can find your SISS advisor in the About Us section under the staff directory. And we advise by last name, so you can find your SISS student advisor who advises by last name. If you have a last name that starts with A, C, D, E, F, or Q, I'm your advisor. Or you can find your other advisor, simply click on here, click on their name, and you can get their phone number, their email address, and a link to schedule an in-person or virtual appointment with your advisor. And that's, I think, what I have for now. So thank you.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, I'm almost done getting all these links into the chat for you all. Multitasking. Okay, thanks again, everybody, for being here. It's been a pleasure. I'll turn off the recording and that's gonna be us.
Have a great weekend. Stay dry, everybody.
Thank you.